All right, folks, just checking in. This is your instructor, Kent Tonkin, coming at you with a special lecture just for my MBA students who happened to not have the recording available from this Friday's lecture. Of course, the lecture was on the 22nd of January, 2021. This is for your tutorial, and we are starting tonight. We're going to be talking about Chapter 1, getting us into some of the key concepts of e-commerce. Now, at this point, if you haven't yet, please do your introduction on Canvas. Please get on the discussion boards that are also tied into that introduction. And our first assignment in this class is tentatively going to be due on the 26th. I anticipate we'll probably be delaying that even further because I'll be covering the assignment in class for our undergrads on Monday, the 25th. So stay tuned to your email, and I anticipate delaying that assignment. Let's jump in. In terms of current events that are happening around the world, right now, pretty big deal. We've had Australia, the country of Australia, and Google have hit an impasse. The nature of this impasse goes something like this. Right now, as a search engine, Google provides access to many, many different media sources, including newspapers, magazines, and other sources of information. In Australia, the government is making a movement that Google should be paying royalties to the content providers, for the people who they locate through their search engine and refer people to so that they can get paid for their content. A great example would be, for example, if you go to news.google.com, and all the news that gets populated there is being produced by other providers beside Google, and they're sharing it for free. So Australia's government is making a motion that Google should be paying royalties or fees for this access to this content. Google doesn't like that idea, and they're actually threatening to pull out of Australia. That becomes even more complicated when we consider that in the country of Australia, over 95% of people using the internet use Google as their primary search engine, which means if Google pulled out of Australia, it could be online chaos for a long period of time while people figure out how to live without Google. What we talked about in class is what is the likelihood of this happening? My prediction is that Google and the government of Australia will come to some sort of middle ground, maybe a flat fee or a royalty paid to content providers as opposed to a per-click kind of royalty that they'd be hoping for. The point of this whole discussion is, in the 21st century, when you have a company like Google whose main source of revenue is still advertising, and this company is also serving as an access point for a lot of information, the question comes down to what kinds of power do tech companies actually wield over information that's available to the general public. This is a key theme of e-commerce as we're going to be exploring it in 2020. I encourage you to look up this news story and do some future research for yourself, but we are going to be talking about where the lines between government and commerce intersect, particularly when it comes to e-commerce. So let's get in. In terms of our first chapter, what we're going to be talking about are the building blocks of e-commerce, where we come from, and how we have come to be where we are at this point in time. So our objectives are to really define e-commerce, to give you a definition, a working definition, and to differentiate it from e-business, and also tell you what kinds of underpinnings really control e-commerce in the modern sense. We're also going to be getting into what we refer to as the unique features of e-commerce technology, which is going to be the basis for your first assignment in this class. We'll also be talking about the major types of e-commerce as well, and getting into the history and how it has grown and evolved, I should say, and what some of the other subject areas and disciplines that are connected to and affected by e-commerce. I mean, we think about things like access to technology, access to capital, access to credit. Those bridge into business and sociological issues as well, even psychological issues when we get into marketing. So there's a lot of cross sections we're going to be talking about. So we really consider, the first 2 decades of e-commerce, I would even say first 2.25 decades, for all intents and purposes, we're going to be considering 1995 as the beginning for business-to-consumer e-commerce, although business-to-business e-commerce goes back much further. What's changed in the first quarter of a century since e-commerce has been available to the masses? The big change, too, is if we look at the first decade of e-commerce, in terms of business-to-consumer e-commerce, 95 to 2005, the rate of change has rapidly accelerated in the last few years as opposed to the first decade. And a lot of that's been for lots of reasons, between generational change, early adoption of technology by generations such as millennials and Gen Z. And on top of it, in the last year of our lives, COVID-19 has pushed people into buying online who would never have considered it before. So there are lots of disruptions going on, but lots of opportunities for people to create new business models. One of the best examples I can think of, Uber and Lyft, actually the best two examples, are companies that came in with a technology solution to a problem that wasn't being addressed, namely an easy and convenient way to access transportation and also to pay for it. If anybody's ever tried to get a cab in a major city in the United States, it can be difficult, and the quality of service can also vary greatly. It's not easy to use an online app to get a ride. At least it wasn't until we had Uber and Lyft. So why do we study this stuff? Well, we're studying it because it's changing the very way we buy and sell in this country and around the world. So in terms of the definition for e-commerce, my favorite definition is using the internet to buy and sell things. The formal definition from our text is there for your perusal, but it really comes down to the idea of buying and selling things using the internet. That's my favorite definition of e-commerce. So what's the difference between e-commerce and e-business? E-business is anything we're using networks or the internet to be able to conduct. So for example, if we're managing companies using video conferencing and doing performance management using performance management systems or other kinds of online metrics, that's all e-business. E-commerce is a part of e-business, but e-business is more than e-commerce. That's the best definition I can give you. So what are some of the building blocks that have enabled e-commerce and e-business, for that matter, to emerge? Well, the internet. If you know any of the history of the internet emerged in the early 1960s as an extension of the United States Department of Defense, who had created a self-healing network to be able to maintain continuity of communications during an atomic attack. It was a military network that didn't really start reaching out to private access in large numbers till the 1990s. Academics and scientists started getting access to the internet in the 70s and 80s. And that's because of the creation of IP networking and address systems that allowed us to communicate over the internet. The World Wide Web is a service that resides on the internet. The World Wide Web is not the same thing as the internet. The web is a service that helps us access the internet. So one of the most important innovations of the internet, or I should say the World Wide Web, is what we refer to as DNS, domain name systems. What that means is instead of going to 192.68.732.52, we can go to www.kenttonkin.com. So it allowed us to translate text into numbers, and that was DNS. HTML, hypertext markup language, is what enabled us to have web pages in the first place that responded to clicks and the idea of tying links to web pages to text. So HTML was one of the primary building blocks. And if we talk about the web is like an iceberg. We see the tip of it, but there's a bigger chunk of it. Most estimates are about 7/8 times bigger than the public internet is the dark web. So there's a lot more out there than we actually see. And of course, we all know that one of the newest and quickest emerging trends is mobile apps, because people are relying less on search engines and more on direct apps to get where they want to go on the internet. So what's happening? As we saw in the opening to the class, we know that e-commerce is one of the quickest, probably the quickest moving and growing part of business at this point in time. And business-to-business e-commerce predates and is bigger than business-to-consumer. Business-to-business e-commerce started in the healthcare sector, a company called Baxter Healthcare, which was using e-commerce to be able to replenish orders of pharmaceuticals and supplies. Mobile and social are the quickest growing parts of e-commerce, the idea that people are buying things on their phones and buying through social networks, which also gets into marketing as well. So what are the unique features of e-commerce? Well, the first is ubiquity. When something's ubiquitous, it means everybody has it. Everybody in the world more or less has a smartphone. In fact, more people have smartphones than running water. That is absolutely true. So it's very viable to say that e-commerce is now a ubiquitous technology. It's a global reach technology because anybody in the world who's on the internet can theoretically transact business with anybody in another place in the world. Now, that's not to say that there are not barriers to access and countries that have limited internet access, etc., but technically we can reach around the world. Universal standards means our devices, regardless of their manufacturer, will still work with each other. If you've got a Google phone or if you have an iPhone, they still use the same networking standards to connect to cell towers, allow us to send text messages to each other, and to access web pages. So universal standards also allow web pages to look good on multiple browsers. Information richness simply means that when we are conducting e-commerce business, that there's a depth of information available about products and services. I can get on Amazon and read lots and lots of reviews. Interactivity means that the companies that we buy from also want to interact with us, whether it's automated with things like chatbots or whether it's responsive customer service. We can ask questions and find more about products and services. Information density, along with the richness of information, things like multimedia density, means there's lots of information out there. Personalization and customization means, for example, when I log on to Amazon and you log on to Amazon, our front pages look different based on our shopping trends because we have unique tastes and different ways we purchase things. So our e-commerce interfaces are geared toward us, and customer relation management systems, CRM systems, are an emerging, no, I shouldn't even say emerging, and a more important tool for e-commerce marketers than ever before. And finally, social technology means we can share our purchases, interact and engage with companies, and also voice our opinions with our friends about our purchases using social media. So Amazon's a great example of this because you can use Amazon on a phone, you can use it on a traditional web browser on a computer or an iPad. Amazon even has connectivity through online buttons you can put on your washing machine to automatically reorder detergent. Amazon gets its supplies globally, and it has a global reach both for customers and suppliers. Again, the universal standards mean that little button I put on my washing machine and my phone both use the same networking standards so that I can use my Wi-Fi network. Richness means I can watch video reviews, read in-depth content. Interactivity, if I've got a problem with a purchase, I can reach out to someone to get information and assistance. Information density means that there's a lot of information out there about the products and services I want to buy. Again, personalization and customization, I can choose what kinds of content comes to my homepage when I log on to Amazon, and also they can recommend purchases to me based on my shopping and browsing habits. And finally, social technology, I can post reviews online, interact with other users, and also share my postings online. So we're going to stop there for the day because that's as far as we got in class on Friday. So we're going to leave it there, and we're going to actually apply the key aspects, the unique aspects of e-commerce to an example in class on Friday, and I will be able to, on Monday, and I'll be able to share that with you in the recording for Monday. I thank you for your patience and having to wait an extra day to get this recording. Hope you're having a great weekend. I look forward to interacting with you all soon. Have a great day.